Way out on the outskirts.
And we are back. Thank you, Eddie Clearwater. That was really good.
Tonight in Space, Eddie Clearwater.
Yeah. Also, for the People's Inauguration, which is going on today, a rally for to get the money out and voters in to the system. Today is the third anniversary of the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, which has nothing whatsoever to do with uniting citizens. Look it up, fight against it, make it go away. Money out, voters in, the People's Inauguration. Okay, it's happening at the Federal Plaza at noon. There we go.
Okay, here we go. And, we usually talk to David about politics. I always want to get his opinion on who's running for what and what's going on.
But today we're going to talk about spirituality, right?
We're going to have an Obama story from David Orr.
Oh, okay.
So, David, good morning to you. And how are you?
Good morning.
How was your breakfast?
It was very good, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I came to listen, but, as a politician,
you'll always get up here.
Maybe a relevant story with President Obama doing his inaugural, Monday?
Yeah.
Many years ago, before he first ran for state senate, okay, and remember the situation for those of you local, there was a good progressive woman named Alice Palmer who was a state senator. She decided she wanted to run for Congress, so she said she wouldn't keep her state senator seat. Young Barack Obama, encouraged by a lot of former Harold Washington people and others, as such a enlightened African American compared to so many of the more traditional folks in the city council, wanted to promote him. So he came to talk to me before he ran. And I kid because I still got the chair. Maybe I can auction that off. But
hey, we got a picture of him with Katie and I.
That's right. He used to come to our benefits. We got some pictures for that, too. But the main thing he wanted to talk about at that point was, because remember, this is what, 86 or 96, I mean? 90?
No, it was 80-something.
80s, whatever it was, a fairly long time ago.
It was like 88, 89.
But I'd been in office many years before that, having to fight the machine on a regular basis. So the conversation was, can you or how do you, quote, stay honest in this Chicago, Cook County climate?
Yep.
That was a little easier for him going to the state legislature than going to the city council, where city council, you're either a lapdog for the mayor or you are in blatant opposition.
Or you get in limbo and going both ways.
Well, I'm speaking, way back when I was there, it was pretty clear cut. You were the enemy. Even if you were nice to them, sometimes you're the enemy. Yeah. So that conversation, it reflects the problem we're all dealing with, and that is we don't really have a representative form of government today because the public is not really being heard, and it's a lot to do with structural things. I mean, we can complain about the machine in Chicago and all the way money dominates politics, etc. But the deeper issues is how do we make these structural changes? You were talking about the Congress. Tom Clark brought up all the gerrymandering. So we know the example where the two states he mentioned, I think Texas and Pennsylvania.
Right.
The Democrats get more votes, but they don't get representation. So there's all those built-in structures because many Americans don't follow this stuff. They don't pay attention. Issues that I would raise that sound idiotic to most, okay, is that it's very hard to push a progressive agenda when you have a structural U.S. that is not democratic. Started with the most important electoral body in our country is the U.S. Senate. And we talk about that, and it came up on Bill Maher's show last night. But your most important body, in which generally conservative Republicans from the small states have the same number of votes as California with 37, 38 million people.
Yeah.
So it's many things like that, including the role of money. And so there's a lot of good progressives all throughout the country fighting many things, including trying to deal with Citizens United, including trying to find ways to, as you talked about, I do believe some of these people can be defeated. As a politician for 30-some years, politicians mostly are followers. And their chief concern is getting re-election. I'm not trying to put them down, but their chief concern is get re-election, whether it's in 2 years or 4 years. So if you're able to prove, if Obama stays strong, if they can win some of these things, you'll see, except for the most crazy ideological ones, you'll see people moving. Conservative Republican becomes more moderate. As the guy that was defeated up here in Illinois. Remember the congressman up here, Dole?
Dold.
He ran as really a right-wing Republican all those years. When it came to the election, all of a sudden he was a big independent, bragging about how he worked with the Democrats. So they will move. The main flaw, and I'll stop, the main flaw from the last 4 years is we kind of sat down. And the big thing for the voters to understand is we encourage them, we all work hard, we get them to come out, they elect somebody, and then they go home, and then the real agenda of government is set by the people, by the lobbyists. So they go home, they think they're done, the lobbyists come in, the agenda is shaped by the insiders, and the issues that most of us care about rarely see the light of day. And if they do, like where are we really on jobs, where are we really on good education, where are we really on building infrastructure, those things get put aside because of special interests.
Well, and also because right behind your words, I feel a lot, David, are the many, many truths about the structure of government that most Joe and Mary ordinary citizen do not know. And when they run up against it, seem arbitrary rulings about who gets to talk when and how a third party is almost absolutely denied the possibility of developing by the rules, and where they could ever find effective citizen lobbying going on. So I always feel like you are one of the few guys who actually cares about people in office, in a high enough office to over all these years to know there is a structure there that people need to have a few keys to open in order to effectively, and therefore, I mean, you have to be effective to stay engaged. If people lose, if people see kids getting killed day after day and nobody doing anything about it, they do stay home on the couch and do turn off the news to watch something like, CSI.
But what I'm suggesting is to keep people engaged is our agenda should be progressive. Stop worrying about, we got to compromise. Our agenda should be very aggressive. I want a stimulus. I want a $600 billion stimulus to help run the states and so forth.
Amen.
The biggest myth that we're fading is this idiotic that there's no economist in the world that really believes it except the ones they pay for.
Right.
That what you do in times like this is to shrink spending. Okay? It's killing the state of Illinois. We could talk more about it if we want. So our agenda should be pushing really hard, and then ideally, the Democrats in Congress, even our friends who might have to compromise more, is they've got something to compromise with.
Right.
Okay? So we should be talking about all those things we really believe in. Serious pushing the state of Illinois. We got a financial crisis. We got a crazy tax system. Everyone's afraid of taxes. In my entire career, I've had to deal with this myth that the voters are going to throw you out. Go back to another story. Way back when Harold was first elected, so Harold was trying to balance the budget. Now Eddie Verdoliak and the 29 were supposedly the Tea Party folks. We got to stop all the spending, etc. And every time Harold would try to move to pass some legitimate taxes, Verdoliak would find some undercover scheme. And one day, a guy, some of you remember Ralph Scott, who was one point head of the Rogers Park Tennis Committee. Verdoliak had a scheme where he was going to fix us independents, and he had hundreds of thousands of flyers attacking each of us on the north side because we're big tax and spenders, because we were going to support a measure that Harold was supporting. Ralph Scott happened to walk in the Democratic Party headquarters and saw that stuff, told me. The next day at a city council meeting, I grab the press and start talking about Verdoliak's dirty tricks. They leave me, they walk to Verdoliak, who's like 8 feet away. Verdoliak, who I have to admit was one of the cleverest SOBs in the world. Verdoliak just looks and says, I don't know what the hell Orr is smoking, but I don't know what he's talking about. Okay. Now the good news, though, is those 100,000 flyers disappeared.
Right.
They didn't go out. The problem is people who work, like, for example, Marion Vellini, who's a pretty good alderman. She's more traditional. She was absolutely scared to death of this and was forced to the right. In fact, she didn't even run again. Right. And I look at these petitions. Well, look at all these petitions signing you against all these taxes. These are my friends. I'd say I'm the damn thing, too. But that doesn't mean they're so stupid they'd vote against me, because I, in fact, believe we have to fill some of these revenue holes.
Right.
So there's the progressives have to go out there and support those people willing to take those risks. Because right now so many politicians are afraid of those risks, because as you know, look at the state legislators. It's not so much that our liberal friends up and down the lakefront would necessarily lose. But if they go against a power structure, certain people, including names you've mentioned on this show, might in fact come up with $300,000 to oppose them. I don't mean to pick on Robin, any of these folks, but all of a sudden, you got an election. Remember, 2 years really means the primary is March of next year.
Right.
It's a year away.
It's coming right up.
Okay, just got elected. So that's what scares them to death. But if they know they have really strong support among these progressive issues, it's easier for them to take on the man, take on the opposition, be the progressive leader we need.
Well, that's one of my problems with the governor. I mean, he gets marginalized by the people who I basically want to go away from government and politics forever. And why is it? I mean, doesn't that sort of say to progressives, don't enter the fray, because this is not a place that respects your point of view. You will be marginalized. You will be made fun of. If you don't have a thick skin, you don't belong here.
I guess what I'm suggesting is less compromise. Governor Quinn is in a situation like the president's, but President Obama has a lot more personal popularity. It's not his fault the state has its incredible budget deficit.
Right.
So under the Democratic control in Illinois, we're cutting the hell out of everything that helps humans all around us.
Yeah, right.
Everybody is being hurt under Democratic control. So at some point you say, instead of this, I'm going to kind of compromise it in the middle, I'm going to either go down in flames or I'm going to build the kind of progressive agenda to actually win. And that means you don't shy away from some of the things. And there's too much compromise.
So did you see the movie Lincoln?
Yes, I did.
Does it speak to this a little bit? And, okay, before you answer that question, Second Amendment, was it really put there to fight against slavery?
That's what I got on Facebook today from my son. It was a thing about the
that's
really
what a bunch of us got.
the gun laws were really put in so that they could have these militias that were hunting down runaway slaves.
Well, remember, like many big issues, there's a lot of complexity. There's something to that, but keep in mind at this time, what so many people were afraid of is uprisings, not particularly from slaves. Remember, what really caused us to go from what's called the Articles of Confederation, 13 individual states, to become the, quote, the new Constitution and the U.S.,
right.
The biggest fear was rabble-rousers, not African-American, rabble-rousers who were challenging the government.
Right.
I forget what the name of the Shays Rebellion. It was a big rebellion led by a former general who were so fed up that they couldn't barely afford the prices they were getting for crops and so forth. They marched on, I forget, New York, one of those places. They marched on it. That scared the living daylights out of the conservatives who were blocking a federal government. And so the main thing of that militia is they needed help fighting the, quote, threat of internal uprisings. Okay, so
Because the volunteer army was all the army that the Federation
yeah,
had.
and at that time when they're trying to fight Shays Rebellion, no one was volunteering. So
Right.
We can never underplay the role of racism in everything, and that's why many people can say, well, Lincoln didn't do that much about the slaves, but on the other hand, you always got to look at their times. In the times, it was dramatic how far he was willing to go.
Right.
You can say the same thing about Kennedy, and Kennedy grew in office, but as he saw all the horrible things happening in 61 and 62, at least whether he was forced or whether he went on his own, he began to step in and do things like send the military into the South and start supporting things. So, but it goes back to our thing, is that no matter what you think of President Obama, and all this mythical, whether he's moderate or not, it's very hard, particularly in today's ultra-conservative climate. Those of you that have been around for 30, 40 years, this is nuts compared to what it used to be. So the only way someone like that politically can actually move to be more progressive has to have groups like us pushing all these things way out, and the compromise is not between Boehner and the right wing. The compromise is between those progressive Democrats that are popular and that are pushing all these things and the more moderate Democrats.
Yeah.
We can win some of those things. I think that's the playbook, hopefully, for the next 4 years.
Okay, I thought you were moving up with a question. What do you? Are you going to the inauguration?
No, I'm.
Staying home?
I'm staying home. I'd love to be there, but I was one of those people that froze my buns off and
4 years ago.
finally had to leave. It got so crazy, the lines at that time, that friends, Maria Whalen and Jack Wiest, they said, come on, let's beat out of here. We go to a hotel so we could actually see the thing. And frankly, it was much better watching it.
Well, Barbangle and I made our way through. We were stuck with a bunch of people standing for about an hour in one place, and finally, it was a little claustrophobic, a little on the scary side. Finally, I just started yelling out, "Yell out your state!" So the group started yelling out, Rhode Island, California, and commentary continued. We warmed ourselves up, and then.
You know what really impressed me in the last inauguration was Michelle and Barack Obama
Walking down.
looking so sharp, walking down the street in that cold, and they must have been freezing.
No, they really. I've never felt so much cold. But at the time, I also ran into Elizabeth Brackett and our friend Marilyn Katz, who were in floor-length furs, but freezing.
Oh, Kate, I would have gotten you
tushes
one for
off.
the trip if I'd known.
No, I saved them because I had a living room to go into a couple blocks away, like you said, to warm up after it. But it was a good moment for all of us, I think.
Other than the thrill of being there live, being there, it's kind of like when we were here in the
To
Heartland.
feel it.
When
Yeah.
Harold got elected, we were here in the
Right,
Heartland.
right.
Many of you, it's way too far for you, but way back in 1979, when we pulled off this miraculous first defeat of the machine in this neighborhood,
Right.
we had an incredible
Thrilling.
party here because it was so.
It was 2
so
nights before the
surprising.
primary when
no,
he was
he's
here.
not-
No, I'm talking about the
79
victory
now.
party.
The
Oh, the
victory
victory-
party
I'm
when
talking
we
about
elected
victory
Orr.
party winning the city council.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Also, same thing with Harold. But other than that thrill of being where everybody is,